As 2020 winds down and you're working on your plans for 2021, how are you planning to raise your profile and attract more of your ideal clients? You have no doubt seen the power of video. When you stop scrolling to watch on social media, when you see videos on websites, and if you're one of the 2 billion monthly users on YouTube. Video is one of the most effective mediums for building trust and credibility and attracting your ideal clients. And while video has long been important, it's even more so now, as everyone continues to adjust to this virtual world and building a valuable virtual brand. Whether you're a current business owner, thinking of going out on your own, want to build your personal brand, or simply be more comfortable and confident in this virtual world, sign up now for a brand new 3-month program that I'm launching with my colleague in the UK, Adam Owen. It kicks off on the 1st of February, so you can enjoy the holidays and get settled after the new year. But register now because we are ending this year with some goodness and giving you 20% off for the rest of 2020. Full details and registration at innovatingadvice.com/ideal clients.
We have been doing these smaller scale events. In person, we would periodically throughout the year kind of weave these in, maybe call it quarterly or as topics came up under an initiative for women's circles. And so we kind of rebranded that, took it online during this time, and created this whole series around women's conversation circles. Figured out what was the optimal environment on Zoom, i.e., probably about 9 to 12 participants, so you can all be on one screen, and then figuring out ways to, I think, really treat it almost like, I think of it as like a curated dinner party.
Welcome to December, the last month of 2020, and to episode 72 of the Innovating Advice Show. I'm joined by Sabrina Lowell, advisor and managing partner at Private Ocean in California. Sabrina has long been a force within the profession. She's been named an innovator and influencer set to change the industry, a woman to watch on multiple lists, and is an active volunteer cultivating the next generation of talent. In this episode, we're talking through how Private Ocean has pivoted their business development and client engagement initiatives in this virtual world. So if you've been wondering how you can bring clients and prospects together for valuable virtual discussions, both large and small, this episode is for you. And as this year winds down and we look to 2021, listen until the end for Sabrina's free offer for 5 listeners to improve your mental fitness. Links and transcript at innovatingadvice.com or directly through the link below. You're listening to the Innovating Advice Show, and I'm your host, Kate Holmes, bringing you the global pulse on financial services innovation, featuring financial planners, financial advisors, and related professionals from all corners of the globe. Let's dive in. Hi, Sabrina. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on today.
I am pumped about this conversation. This is something that a lot of people are struggling with. But before we dive into business development in this virtual world we're all living in, tell us a little bit about Private Ocean.
Well, we are a full-service wealth management firm on the West Coast. Previously, we would say that we had 3 offices, and now we have about 50 offices, which is which has actually been really great. Just from a cultural standpoint, it's no longer kind of this office or that office. We're just all one big team, and we work with high net worth individuals and families along the West Coast.
And the West Coast of the US. So I think people can tell by your accent being in, not that your accent is California, it could be from a lot of places in the US, but you are based in the beautiful state of California. So do you have employees just throughout California or throughout the US?
We have our employees predominantly live in California and Washington, although we have a couple people in Colorado, and right now a few living in Florida. So we're all kind of spread out, but for the most part, our physical office spaces are in both the Bay Area and then in Seattle, Washington.
Yeah. So, how did everything go at Private Ocean when the world suddenly went into lockdown and everyone was working from home?
I think it was obviously a big mental shift. And I remember I had actually been on vacation. I flew into SFO the morning of March 16th, which is when San Francisco went into shelter in place.
Yeah.
So I came back right into kind of the thick of things. And I think one thing that we did really well as a company was we had already had, being in the Bay Area, disaster plans in place so that if there was some sort of a natural disaster, that everyone could work remotely. And so we were able to leverage off of that infrastructure to immediately pivot into people working from home. And where there were gaps, just in terms of if someone didn't have the right kind of technology set up, or video camera or microphone, or home phone, we spent the first couple of weeks really ferreting that out and making sure that all of the employees had everything that they needed to be fully functional at home. So it was certainly fast and furious there in the beginning, but now it just kind of seems commonplace.
That's awesome. And yeah, it was certainly a reminder to so many people of the importance of those disaster recovery plans, whether it's a natural disaster, it's a power outage, internet outage. I mean, my goodness, could you imagine if this happened before we had widespread internet available everywhere?
It is hard to believe. And even in the current day and age, interestingly, because we do have a number of employees who are up in the Marin area, and we've been having the rolling brownouts with some of the fires. And so that has been one that we have worked around, where if an employee maybe loses internet connectivity, and typically those are sort of planned, or you'll get a notification, but we do have the ability to have them go into a physical office where internet is available. So even with the best laid plans, you still need a backup or a contingency plan.
Yep. Plan B, plan C, throw in a plan D for good measure. So, how has the lockdown brought, initiatives that Private Ocean had planned up a few years into the forefront this year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think pivot is the key word for a lot of folks. Coming into 2020, one of our big initiatives really was around business development, and we had talked about a number of different types of either events or client interactions that we were planning for the year. And with the whole shelter in place, we really had to rethink those. I think right out of the gate. And here's what I will say: right out of the gate, what it meant was we didn't, all the thinking that we were going to do, we sort of just went into action. And so initially
Nice.
I think initially we really focused on more what I would call sort of one way virtual content, i.e., maybe creating a webinar or creating some sort of short snippet or video that provided information and was outward bound to clients. And then once we got into that and really figured out which were the pieces that were really landing with clients and being able to track that, who opens, how long are they watching, what content was most popular, then what we were able to do is to take some of that information and then begin creating different either large scale or smaller scale interactive virtual content that really, I think, deepened relationships with clients as we moved into summer months and now leading up to year end.
So, what would you say? I've got a couple of questions on that. In terms of the fact that you guys were able to move into action, that's pretty awesome. And that kind of gets into a lot of times you'll hear people talk about goals and saying, hey, you actually have to set a deadline, because some people procrastinate, some are going to do it earlier. But if you have a deadline, it's like, this has to be done, then guess what? It tends to actually get done. So with this, it was like, hey, we can think about it, we can plan. But now it was like, okay, we have to do it. Is that a cultural thing within Private Ocean to have the ability to just move into that action phase?
I do think that, that's a great question. I do think that there is a cultural aspect there, but I think that the bigger driver in this particular case was necessity, right? Before it was, these would be nice to haves and maybe they'll get onto the calendar at some point. Just as you were talking about, sort of the idea of planning until maybe it's a perfect plan and then executing it and practicing. And what what the current environment, or back in March, what it really necessitated was us taking action right away and realizing, gosh, it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly perfect. This idea that we're now all in our homes, right? Here I am, you're sitting in my living room. It kind of, I think, lends itself to being able to just get something out there, producing a piece of content and getting it out there with the idea that maybe it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. And that knowing that clients or prospective clients or people within our network on the receiving end also maybe didn't have quite the same standard as they were consuming that information. So I think that the environment as a whole made it easier to kind of move a lot more quickly.
And you said earlier, you guys work with high net worth clients. And, I'm always talking about being authentic. And I just ran a 30-day video challenge to get people to do more video. But we still have so many expectations in this profession of, presenting a perfect front, and people thinking that it has to be a professional camera and professional lighting and, all these things that go into it. So even, what are we, 8, 9 months into the pandemic, a lot of people still haven't sort of accepted that more casual feel. And one of the reasons I've heard is, hey, we work with high net worth clients. So how have your clients responded to, having this imperfect content?
I think it does really matter who your client base is. And I'll speak for sort of my clients personally, because we are a larger RIA. So each of the advisors, well, we have kind of a firm-wide profile. Each of the advisors specialize maybe in different niches or have slightly different client bases. So a handful of years ago, we had done some work out of our San Francisco office and came up with this idea of a client avatar. So we call her Kate McKinsey. And she's this 40-year-old, 40-something, actively in career engaged mom who has young kids and aging parents and is kind of managing it all. And so as I thought about, or as we thought about, what are we going to be projecting during this time? And then thinking about, what are the Kate McKenzies, what is their day-to-day experience and how are they managing it all? Knowing that, okay, this type of content that maybe is a little more casual, it still has a very professional look and feel, but it is more casual. How will that land with that exact client audience that I'm sending it to? And so I think that there is a need that, if depending on what types of clients that you're interacting with, maybe that does look a little bit different and you're tailoring it a bit. But I love the idea that you were talking about, just this notion that, okay, you really do have to be authentic. And during this time, I do find myself sharing probably a lot more about myself with clients, and really letting them not just into my house, but sort of who I am at home. So you are kind of treading that line, but it's a lot easier if your professional and your personal self are pretty well aligned. It's less work, and I think it's been actually one of the assets that we've had during this time in relating to clients.
And that's a really big thing you just said, in terms of having your personal life and your professional life well aligned. And again, that gets back to, it's almost these masks we wear in the profession. And I know I've done it, and I would imagine you have too, being a woman in this still male dominated profession, of feeling like you have to present yourself a certain way. And it can be hard to be authentic and be yourself.
I think that that's right. And being able to settle into that and be comfortable with it, there is an ease about it. And figuring out, when do you bring, I think it's like a communication strategy, right? So there are clients who want big picture, and then there are clients who want a lot of detail. So I think that you can be yourself, and you don't always have to be on volume 10 all the time. It's figuring out, based on who you're talking to, being authentic regardless, but are you maybe at a volume 2, or are you at a volume 10? And that's the other piece that has been interesting during this time, which is really figuring out how to effectively communicate with clients that's going to land in the virtual environment.
So what are some of those specific ways that you have done that?
Well, I mean, there's the traditional meetings, right? So the show must go on, and so we did pivot to having all of our meetings virtually on Zoom. Um, One of the things that we maybe talked more about on the front end was we, as employees, made the commitment to always having a camera on. And initially, we saw that some clients had cameras, some didn't, but we really encouraged them to make sure that they were coming to the meetings prepared to be on camera. So it's partially managing that expectation. And what we found is that over time, now when we do get on those meetings, it does feel like, I mean, in the absence of being in person, it's the closest thing that we have to a face-to-face. And I do notice, like I was on a meeting probably last week with a client where their video camera wasn't working, and realizing that that's when you feel a little deprived of that interaction because you are missing the facial cues, and it really makes it feel like we are all kind of sitting in our own home, isolated, alone. And
Yeah.
so the kind of establishing what the expectation is and helping clients be able to actively participate, I think has helped us during this time. And I think we're going to get into some of the maybe like smaller scale events that we've been doing as well that have helped facilitate those interactions.
Yeah, and I definitely want to hear about those because I think those are great ideas for what other people are struggling with right now. One question first is, what is the average age of your clients?
I think firm wide, we have clients that are, that span all the way from new college grads all the way up to, I think we just had a client turn 100.
No way.
But in general, I think that a natural market for advisors is probably about 10 years of a bell curve on either side of their age. So the majority of my clients, I would say, are probably in their early 30s to call it late 40s to early 50s. And so a lot of the clients that I'm working with really are these career engaged couples where you have oftentimes the female is the primary breadwinner or earner.
That's awesome.
It's been interesting during this time to even take, I think, that niche one step further in that. So we have been doing these smaller scale events. In person, we would periodically throughout the year kind of weave these in, maybe call it quarterly or as topics came up under an initiative for women's circles. And so we kind of rebranded that, took it online during this time, and created this whole series around women's conversation circles, figured out what was the optimal environment on Zoom, i.e., probably about 9 to 12 participants, so you can all be on one screen, and then figuring out ways to, I think, really treat it almost like, I think of it as like a curated dinner party.
Yeah.
So it is finding, because I do have clients that are outside that exact bell curve. I have retirees, I have, younger sort of children of clients. So my clients do span that whole range. But with these events, figuring out, okay, if the topic is like one that we did early on was around controlling what you can control, and going back to the Kate McKenzies of the world. So these are women who are managing it all, and now they're at home. And then deciding, okay, 9 to 12 participants, who might those be within a client base that really, if I were having a dinner party and having them over to sit around my dining room table, who do I think would enjoy meeting each other? And who do I think would get along well? And who would I sit next to the other person? And how would I introduce them? And then bringing them together in a facilitated Zoom conversation, and then hosting a couple of these. So we did one that was more new grads, so 20 somethings. Then we did one that really were the Kate McKenzies, and then also facilitated one that were more sort of in that next career phase, maybe retired or figuring out what's next for them. And so having different groups so that when they got onto the call or the meeting, they kind of showed up and went, gosh, these are my people. I get this. And as we started to get into, as people wanted to share and participate, only to the extent that they wanted to, other folks on the line could really relate to them. And then we've also done larger scale events where it's more, okay, let's open that up to all of the female clients, because it's more of maybe here's the initial kind of educational content, and then to the extent that people sort of here and there want to weigh in, that's a different type of event. So
I really like the thoughtfulness around having 9 people on there. That way you make sure everyone can see each other on the same screen. That's one of those really nice touches. And for all of this from a business development perspective, is this all just existing clients, or are you leveraging these curated dinner parties to also invite prospective clients?
again, I think it goes back to topic and content. So some of them we've really focused on client only, and one of the really fun parts about that too is because people are opting in. And I remember one of the early on ones that we did, as I sent out a thank you email afterwards, and I always use the BCC function. And somebody responded and said, you know what, I'd love the contact information for other people. And they have kind of asked for, could we do a redux now that we're coming to year end? And I'd love to reconnect with those women that we early on in shelter in place really felt like they had this deep conversation with.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is great. I recently did a larger scale event. We had about 50 women, and this was sent out to clients that I work with, along with some of the other people in my network. So also invited friends who I think would be a great fit to get introduced to Private Ocean, just from a business development point, along with clients, and then also COIs that we work with. So bringing many different people into that particular conversation. And that was we titled it Ballots and Bubbles.
Nice.
And here in the Bay Area, a lot of people are very civically involved, and so had a lobbyist come in and give a nonpartisan overview of the initiatives that were on the ballot and how women who want to get more engaged could be thinking about some of those initiatives, what was behind them, and also what the implications might be on the other side of it. I also have clients in LA that some of whom I have never had been able to attend an in-person event. And so that was great to be able to have them on the line and participating. So that was kind of an unexpected gift in that regard.
Well, and how nice is it that it's not just a meeting talking about investments or what the stock market is doing or how to save for retirement? It was something else to bring people together and have a meaningful conversation at a really important time.
I think that is important, right? It's figuring out who is that target client that you're working with, what is the demographic, and then kind of putting yourself in their shoes. It's relatively easy for me because I kind of fit in that demographic, and saying, gosh, what's the type of content that they're really going to be interested in, and thinking outside the box, because I think it is important to have communication and events on the traditional topics around financial planning and investments, but also what are all these other aspects of our clients' lives, especially in that target demographic, that they're really passionate about, where we as their advisors can be a resource and a thought partner.
Which also really hammers home the importance of having that avatar and that ideal client. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with. I am regularly talking to people, and it feels like 90% of the answers in terms of what is the biggest challenge that people have is attracting their ideal client. And then when I dig deeper, realize they don't know who their ideal client is.
And I think that oftentimes there can initially be sort of a fear, if I narrow my focus so much, will I miss out on other client opportunities? And I like to hail back to, I think it was a Sex and the City episode
Nice.
where Carrie was dating, and she described it. It's kind of like when you have your taxi cab light, when the taxi cab light is on, everybody knows that you're open for business. And you start to put yourself out there, and maybe you're looking for this particular thing or person. But other people are really attracted to that because you're kind of out there and you're doing your thing and you're putting out into the universe something that's really attractive. So even though the Kate McKenzies of the world are what I would describe as my sort of ideal client persona, and a lot of the communication and content that I put out for my clients is really geared towards that. If I have other clients that come to me that are attracted to some of the topics or blogs or videos that I'm putting out there, I'm not going to say no. If they're a good fit in with some of the other characteristics, I'm also going to work with them too. But it means that I take a lot of the guesswork or out of sort of doing that scattershot approach where I go, I don't know what's going to resonate with people.
Yeah. So is Private Ocean growing at this time throughout 2020 and the pandemic?
I think for a lot of wealth managers, including us, it's been a great year. In some ways, this has been a real opportunity for clients or for folks who maybe didn't have an advisor and realized with the current market environment, they needed an advisor,
Yeah.
or for people who were with an advisor who maybe wasn't as proactive or communicative or didn't necessarily stick to their knitting in terms of the strategy throughout this year. And I think that was a really important piece, is having a strategy that's consistent, especially in these types of market conditions. So that's been an interesting one, taking on new clients in a virtual environment that you've never met in person.
Yeah. But it can be done, right? And it all still works. You move from that, hey, this might be an option, to, like you said earlier, you just move straight into action.
Yeah, and we've always had some remote clients. As I was saying, I have some clients who are in LA. I have clients who are in Seattle since I grew up in that area. I have a client who lives in London. So we have clients who are all over, but typically they came to us as a choice without actually having met us in person, whereas now it's a necessity. And so there is a little bit of, I think that there's some additional work that needs to be done in order to kind of get people over that hurdle. I can recall one of the clients that I started working with this year. It was interesting. So here we are, we're on Zoom, we're having this great initial conversation. It's via video. I always ask people for that initial, if they reach out about our services, I say, hey, can we hop on a Zoom call? Well, it'll probably be about 30 to 60 minutes, depending on how things are going. And I think that really kind of, it puts people at ease initially, because then they can see who is this person behind the voice. It's not just on the phone.
Yeah.
So here I am, and we're talking through it, and it's becoming, pretty evident that they were wanting to move forward. And I remember they asked, well, do you think that will you be having in-person meetings anytime soon? And this was like back in, I don't know, maybe May or June. And I was kind of thinking, no. But what it triggered for me, I said back to them, I said, what would be important about meeting me in person? What's important about that to you? And that led to some really fruitful conversation. It was more around the vetting process. Are you actually an advisor that has a real business, and who else is kind of involved in this? And so we were able to figure out what was important about the in-person meeting, or seeing our office in person, in order to establish trust, and what were some of the other pieces that we could do around introducing other people that were on the team or otherwise, to really make this new client feel comfortable in engaging us and moving forward.
That's interesting. So even though you guys have a clearly very professional website and list all the people on there, did you then do more of those video meetings with other members of the team with this prospect?
It is being able to bring other people in. Also, one thing that we found that has been helpful is having the ability to maybe get a specific referral from an existing client, or if it's a professional where we're sharing the relationship. So figuring out what is it that's going to put this person at ease, and help them feeling comfortable. And so now, now they're totally onboarded, and we're recently meeting. They kind of had referenced, gosh, and I've never met you in person, but I feel like I know you. And that was the important part, right? It's like, how do you establish that relationship? Now, that also may be more generational. Some people are more comfortable doing everything online. And I do find that some of our younger clients, especially who are in the tech space, are very comfortable, and sometimes that doesn't even come up as a question.
Yeah.
They have different types of questions on the vetting front.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. So, how are people finding you now versus how they found you before? Are you noticing a difference in just what's attracting people to you?
I think it's a lot of the things that we've traditionally done. So new clients are coming to us because they either Googled us and found something online. It might be because they were referred by an existing client, or that they were referred by a professional. But I think what's different in this environment, it goes back to what's going to help them in getting over that I guess that next step in engaging us. And I think what's going on, it's always happened, but I think it's ramped up, which is what I call the internet stalking, right? And well, it is.
Yeah.
It's like, if you get referred to someone, I mean, if I'm referred to somebody, a new CPA or an attorney or whatever that professional might be, I mean, I'm in the process of a home redecoration process right now, and I went out and I Googled all the information I could
Oh,
find.
yeah.
So I call it this internet stalking, where it's like, okay, what is online about this person? What can I find out about them? How can I gain a sense for who they are and what they represent? And is that consistent? Does it resonate with me? And what it does is it builds this comfort level, so that by the time that you're actually talking now remotely, that they feel like there's already a relationship with you. And part of what's helped facilitate deepening that relationship before we've even talked in person during this time, I think are things like video content that's
Yeah.
online on our website, or that we put out on LinkedIn or on our Facebook page. But I would say predominantly through our website, so that people can get to know us. And so by the time that we're actually connecting in person, again, they're already having a relationship with our firm and with our advisors. So it feels like a really natural next step to engage us and move forward.
Yeah, that's all so important. And having a profile or presence on social media, or at least if you say on your website that you're on social media platforms and people go there, that they don't find that nothing's been posted in the last 4 years, but just having that content. And the interesting thing I found is that people don't, not even often, I think people never really consume all of the content, but there's something about seeing that there is content that, to your point, builds that trust and builds that confidence in, that you are a real business and you're fully established.
I think that's right. And and I think it is, to some degree, having a couple of different options. So having, for example, both blog posts and video content,
Yep.
having photos and commentary, or whatever that looks like. So it's not just one option. It's, oh, I found this on this website and this over here, and each of those pieces kind of come together in creating that puzzle or that picture of who this professional is.
Yeah, definitely. So you guys creating more content now during the pandemic and communicating with clients more frequently?
I would say there's a couple different questions there. So are we creating more content? Absolutely. We were already creating content, and I think we've increased that effort, especially content that focuses on the things that are most important to clients during this time, both just on a qualitative sort of, how am I managing through all of this, but also what do I need to know about legal changes, for example, that have taken place this year. So more content, because there's more information that I think needs to get in front of clients, but also different types of content. So we just launched a podcast earlier this year that's out. And again, a lot of these short videos, longer videos, interactive webinars, smaller curated sessions. So trying to figure out blog posts. So trying to figure out all different ways to get information out there and then allowing clients to opt into the pieces that resonate most with them.
And are you guys doing that all internally and kind of figuring out who likes writing, who likes doing video, who likes doing podcast, and sort of assigning those different content mediums to different people within the team?
We do, and just as you're saying, I mean, inevitably, based on maybe an advisor or an employee's strengths, they're going to gravitate maybe towards one versus another. So I think allowing for the opportunity in all of those spaces, and then I think encouraging employees, both client facing and non-client facing, to participate.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And have you had any adjustments to your service models, just given, like you just said, that this has been such a wild year with so much going on? Have you found that clients need different levels of service this year?
I wouldn't necessarily say so much service models. We certainly do have service models in terms of how we approach client relationships, but I think what it's meant for us is, and especially during the onboarding, is figuring out, okay, we want a consistent process that hits on these particular topics or tasks, but it may look slightly different for different clients. So for example, like one of the clients that I brought on earlier this year, they are, again, a career engaged couple, very busy, really only had probably 30 to 45 minutes snippets of time in a single chunk. So it's taking that content and parsing that out in a way that's very digestible for them. I have another client that I can think of that I brought on this year who's a retiree. So they really want more of the deep dive education. They're okay to spend 2 hours in a meeting and they have ample availability. So each of those new clients are getting a similar onboarding and client experience, but they're digesting it in a way that really works and resonates for them. And that takes just, I think, initially in our conversations is saying, okay, here's what an engagement looks like based on who you are and where you are right now and your time and appetite. How should, here are different ways to structure that and what is going to work best for you. But I think it's also been a good opportunity for us to go back to existing clients where we would typically meet on whatever the meeting cadence is, having, for example, an annual client review and going back to them and saying, what's really most important to you right now? And do we need to kind of maybe shift the way that we're meeting with them? Maybe that's meeting with them and their attorney during this time. Maybe it's just meeting with them. Maybe it's that I had a number of clients who said, gosh, my children are, they were going off to college, now they're at home, or they thought that they were getting a job, but now they aren't. So it's, we really don't necessarily need to meet with you right now. We want to make sure that everything's being taken care of, but let's spend that time that we would have otherwise, and let's bring our kids into this meeting and talk about financial education or cash flow or whatever that might be. So I think it's just been being able to be fluid and really meeting clients where they are and figuring out what's most important to them and tackling that.
That's great. I like the flexibility, and that really helps to engender trust with clients, and just knowing that you can be flexible. And sometimes people are going to have more time in their lives, sometimes they're going to have less, and knowing that it's not just a stringent, we're going to meet every 6 months for an hour and a half and take it or leave it.
Well, and I do think that something that's really important about that, especially when you're either early on in your career or when you are running a business, you do want a consistency. So just because you're flexible and fluid doesn't mean that there isn't a consistency to it. So it's the sort of what's going on above the waterline that clients are experiencing, and then what's going on below the waterline, which is the piece that we're managing in the background. And I do think that that's an important part as you're thinking about what does the fluidity look like, but how do you continue to maintain the service that clients expect and that we need to be doing as advisors.
Yeah, I like that. Awesome. You've got my mind buzzing with all these different virtual options. I'm still loving the idea of those curated dinner parties. I know tons of listeners would love to do that. And on that, I know a lot of people have concerns about client confidentiality. And in all honesty, I sometimes feel like people use that almost as a compliance crutch. So, have you guys had any issues with? I mean, you said clients want to do this more often and reconnect with those people. So, were there any concerns in the beginning about client confidentiality?
Great question. The way that we really tee that up, and again, we have smaller events and larger events. So for some of our larger, maybe all firm events, oftentimes we will use, if you're in Zoom, we'll use more of the, I think it's the webinar or the broadcasting feature where participants they aren't able to see each other. We're able to see them, but they aren't able to see each other. So there really is that confidentiality or anonymity. For these smaller events, I think what's most important is queuing up what are the expectations when people opt in. So I'm really clear when I invite someone, this will be a small event. We expect that everyone, we'd like everyone to come on time and participate for the full hour and a half. We really think about this as a curated invitation only event where everyone's going to be present. Come ready to share. You're not going to be required to, but share what you're comfortable with. And then when we get into the event, I think leading up to it, we're having everything is on a BCC, so it's not that we're sharing contact information. And then we let people know when you log in and on your Zoom, you choose how you would like to do it. You can either just put your first name or you can put your first name, last name on your Zoom profile so other people can see. And then what we do is we do also say, leave your kind of professional hat at the door. So as we go around and we do introductions initially, we're using first names and we're not saying, where do you work or anything like that. It's just, share something about yourself that you feel comfortable in sharing. So a lot of those other pieces are kind of left outside the meeting, and then this group of women can connect and share exactly what they're comfortable sharing.
But I like that you found a really great way to handle that in a way that makes the participants feel really comfortable. And it's actually kind of nice that you say leave the professional side at the door, because it sounds like those conversations are much more about the person and bringing that authenticity. And you encourage that throughout the whole process. So that's fantastic.
Well, and when it's in a mixed group, so if we have clients and professionals and prospective clients, which we encourage for some of our events, prospective clients to attend, obviously we're not identifying them. So what we do is let people know ahead of time, either this will be a client only event or this will be an event where we have different people within our network that have a relationship with Private Ocean.
Nice. That's awesome. Sabrina, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so excited to see the feedback from listeners. I think a lot of people will be adopting some of these ideas and hopefully going down that path and creating their Kate McKinsey avatar, figuring out who that ideal client is, who they're creating that content for. And I know you've got some stuff coming up in 2021, and one of those things is finishing an interesting training that you're going through.
I am in the midst. I am already a certified coach, and I'm taking it one step further, getting a new certification in the area of, it's called mental fitness. And the really cool part about it is it's a program that uses technology. So there's an app that really helps condition. So when you come to a fork in the road and you're making a decision, how do you form essentially new neural pathways so that your brain can go to the neural pathway that says, okay, this could be a gift or opportunity versus what could be a very downward spiral. This is happening to me. I don't have any choice here. And so within that process, it's a 6-month coaching certification process. I do have to have a number of people go through the program. So I am looking for probably about another 5 participants. So I'd say a call to action would be if anyone is listening who might be interested in that. It is for certification, so I wouldn't charge. but it takes a 6-week commitment and daily exercise. But I went through the program earlier in the year myself, and just found it to be a really interesting and grounding technique, especially during this time where there are so many gifts and opportunities, to be able to kind of ferret out what is that silver lining in what is going on right now.
That's incredible. So could that be available to 5 people anywhere in the world?
Yeah, I think absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of the work really is it's on your own. It's daily through an app. It's tailored to you. So absolutely, I open it up to anywhere in the world. My husband's family is from Sydney, so I realized during this time it is super easy with technology to communicate with anyone, anywhere. So yes, the
Yes.
offer stands.
That's awesome. Okay, I'll grab a little blurb from you and put that in the show notes, and your contact info in the show notes. So if you are interested in being one of those 5 people, jump on that. That sounds fantastic. Sabrina, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for everything you're doing, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks for listening to the Innovating Advice Show. If you're wondering where to start, head to innovatingadvice.com/start for a short video series walking you through 3 steps to identify opportunities for innovation in your financial advice or financial planning business. Again, that's innovatingadvice.com/start.